start recording this lecture. So I will try to post this abbreviated lecture when I'm done on the website. Anyone else with a question? Okay. So this should not take particularly long. So let's go back and look at, I do have a question. Yes, so I got a question if office hours are bolted onto the end of class. That's absolutely right. So I will be holding office hours just as soon as I get done here. Okay, so let's just take a look at the web project description. And I am going to turn off my video if I can, because it tends to slow things down. Well, let's just keep going. Okay, so looking at, there were 9 relations. Looking at the first 3, I think almost everyone got the primary key right. So with the instructors, the primary key was the instructor ID, and the remaining attributes were descriptive attributes about an instructor. It was the same thing with the course. Course ID is the primary key, and the course title is a descriptive attribute. With the sections, the section ID is the, whoops, I'm sorry. With outcomes, not section ID. Nope. Okay, that took care of actually 2 of the easiest cases, instructors and courses. Everything else becomes a bit more complicated. So a section has a section ID, and in fact, that is the primary key. The course ID and the instructor ID were foreign keys into the course and instructors, and then semester and year were descriptive attributes. So section ID was also a primary key. Remember, you could treat it either as an entity or a relationship. Okay. When we got to outcomes, we come to the first issue. So you see an outcome ID, and many of you just put down outcome ID as the primary key. But the problem is, it is not unique, because you could have the same. Let's go look actually at the ABET outcomes for our department. Okay, so these are the student outcomes we expect you to have. And you can see that computer engineering and electrical engineering has 1 set of outcomes. There's 7 of them. You can see that computer science has 6 outcomes. But what you can also see is computer science has them numbered the same way that computer engineering and electrical engineering has them numbered. So the outcome ID is not unique. It's going to be CS, computer engineering, and electrical engineering all have an outcome ID of 1. So the outcome ID by itself doesn't make the tuple unique. You also need the major. And let me show you what happens if you make the primary key be incomplete. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log in to the Hydra machines. And I'm going to go to my solution. And Hydra is pretty slow right now. Okay, so I'm going to first copy my thing. Now I'm going to edit it. So I'm going to go to the create table for outcomes. And I'm going to delete major as a primary key. Okay, so it's no longer part of the primary key. So many of you did this. You only declared the outcome ID as the primary key. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the SQL database. And I'm going to source that. And I have a foreign key is incorrectly formed because in deleting that primary key, I also, so let me do a modification. I have to find where I use outcome ID as a foreign key. Okay, so I used it here as a foreign key on outcome results, so I'm going to get rid of it there. So when I get rid of major as a primary key, I also have to get rid of major as a foreign key everywhere that I used it. And unfortunately, this is just taking longer than I would like because of how slow the Hydra machines are right now. So this was another issue. Some of you tried to create foreign keys. And when you have a foreign key, it has to depend on the, pretty much, you have to have declared a primary key for it to depend on. So many of you would say that outcome ID was a foreign key for narratives, but you had not declared outcome ID as a primary key. So that could be the other problem. Foreign keys have to depend on primary keys. Okay. Okay, that takes care of all of them. So I think I can probably source it again. Okay, this time it worked. There was no error. So now I'm going to try sourcing in my solution data. And you can see I'm getting error in line file. Solution data cannot add or update. A foreign constraint fails. And let's see. Actually, before I got to that, I got a duplicate entry right here. That's what I wanted. So error duplicate entry 1 for key primary, line 19 in solution data. So let's look at line 19 now in the solution data. Okay, and you can see that I am trying to insert into outcomes, and you can see I have multiple primary keys of 1 because I only declared the primary key for outcomes to be outcome ID. And the problem is it's not unique because there is one outcome for each of my 3 majors. So this is what messed up our testing of many of your homeworks submissions for homework 1 is you had incomplete partial keys. So for the outcomes, the primary key was actually outcome ID and major, the combination of the 2. Then for outcome results, this one is also tricky. So you can start with, okay, every section has to report some outcome results, but it reports results for multiple outcomes. So you have to include the outcome ID in the primary key. But it is possible also that a section is evaluating different majors, and they might be evaluating outcome 1 for both EE majors and CPE majors. So the primary key has to at least include the section ID, the outcome ID, and the major. But for each outcome for a major, we report 3 different performance levels: meets expectations, exceeds expectations, and not meets expectations. So for each of the 3 performance levels, we're going to have a number of students. So it turns out we also have to include performance level. So if we're looking at outcome results, what I have highlighted in blue here is the primary key. It's 4 attributes: a section ID, an outcome ID, a major, because a section assesses an outcome for a major and reports on the number of students for that performance level. And there's 3 different performance levels, so you have to include performance level in the key. The only descriptive attribute here is number of students. Okay, any questions about that before I move on? Okay, so moving on to assessments, I included the assessment. I made a primary key here, which was assessment ID. And the reason I did that is without an assessment ID, it turns out that pretty much you need everything as the primary key. So a section ID, a section is going to assess multiple outcomes, and it may assess the same outcome for multiple majors. So at the very least, section ID, outcome ID, and major would have to be part of it. But that just gets me, I have an assessment plan for every outcome, section, and major. So for every section that assesses an outcome for a major, there may be 1 or more assessments for that major. And it turns out that the weight could be different or could be the same. I could have 3 assessments all with the same weight. There's a good chance that at least the assessment description would be different. So there's a possibility that I could say section ID, assessment description, outcome ID, and major is going to be the primary key. I thought there was a small chance that even the assessment description could end up being duplicated. And so I thought the only real way to assure myself of a nice compact primary key was to use assessment ID as the primary key. So I introduced an artificial key for assessments, and I called it assessment ID. So most of you got that right. Coming down here to narratives, again, a section assesses multiple outcomes, so you can't just have the section ID be the primary key. You have to include at least the section ID in the outcome. But even for the same outcome in the same section, you might be assessing that outcome for more than 1 major. So it turns out the primary key for narratives has to be section ID, major, and outcome ID. And then these three attributes are descriptive attributes. Okay. Coming down to performance levels, this one, the performance level, is what uniquely determines each performance level. So you had that it was a enumerated constant. I made it be that enumerated constant. You look at mine, my sample data. Sorry, need to go back to my sample data now. And I'm sorry, Hydra again is being very slow. Okay, I used 1, 2, and 3. Later on, I used enumerated constants. Look at my sorry. There we go. I used enumerated constants for performance level, NME, ME, EE, and they start at 1. So 1 is NME, 2 is ME, 3 is EE. At any rate, these are the keys for performance level. They are uniquely describing description. Okay, and remember, it was just too long in every outcome result. I did not want to have to put the description. It's a long string. So that's why I introduced performance level to save storage. Okay, it's the only reason I introduced performance level as a relation is to save storage. An integer is much more succinct than a descriptive string. So performance level is the primary key for performance levels. So the last one is course outcome mapping. And so we have a course, and a course can assess multiple outcomes. So it is not enough to just have the course ID. It also must include the outcome ID. But any course may be assessing the same outcome for multiple majors. So I have to include course ID, outcome, and major. But as it turns out, given the semester and the year, we might be assessing the same or different outcomes. So in EECS, we evaluate what we call hard skills in one set of years, and we evaluate soft skills like teamwork, communication in the other set of years. So you might say the even numbered years, we evaluate soft skills. The odd numbered years, we evaluate the hard skills. Hard skills might be ability to analyze a problem, ability to do design, ability to do experiments. Those would be hard skills. So we might say in 2020, we might analyze, say, outcome. So in fall, we might analyze outcome 3, which is communication for CS. We might do that in CS402. And then in 2022, we again are going to be analyzing it. So if you look at this, it should be clear that everything has to be in the primary key. Nothing by itself, like if we just try to put these three, the course, the outcome, and the major, well, that's not unique because we have 402 assess outcome 3 for CS majors in both the fall of 2020 and the fall of 2022. So the only way that it becomes unique, it turns out, is if all 5 attributes are part of the primary key, because we may end up assessing the same outcome in the same course for the same major in multiple years and win the same semester. So it turns out we have to use the entire thing as the primary key. Now you may wonder, why don't I introduce an artificial key for course outcome mapping? And the reason is it would never, ever be used in a join. That's why. You use the course ID as a way to join into a section, and you use the outcome ID and the major as a way to join into the outcome results and into the narratives, but you never use the entire primary key as part of a join. If you look at my definition for course outcome mapping, you see that I use the course ID as a primary key, you can see as a foreign key, and I use course outcome ID and major as a foreign key, but at no time do I use the entire primary key ever in any aspect as a primary key. This relation completely depends on other relations. There's just no reason to have an artificial key for the primary key. It would be a complete waste of space because I'd never use the primary key in a join. So that's why I did not introduce an artificial key as a primary key for course outcome mapping. It was unnecessary. So I simply declared the primary key to be all 5 attributes. And this was critical because otherwise, again, you would end up rejecting some of my input data. Okay, so do I have any questions about any of that? I know that perhaps was a bunch to take in, but it would behoove you to go back and change your primary keys to match what I just said. Okay, also foreign keys. I think most of you have gotten your foreign keys fixed, but in your first homework assignment, many of you had incomplete foreign keys that were being rejected because they did not depend on primary keys. Foreign keys have to depend on primary keys. Okay? So if I have no question, oh, Braden, looks like I have a question from you. Go ahead, Braden. No question? Go ahead, Braden. Braden, you're unmuted, but I can't hear you.
Hello?
There you go.
This is more of a question. This might have been the wrong time to ask, but it was really about the grading.
Go ahead.
If we're
just a sec, Braden.
like missing,
just a sec, Braden.
if we're missing, let's say like.
Braden, hold on for 1 second, okay?
Okay, gotcha.
It's fine for everyone to go at this point. I'm going to keep recording and answering questions, but it's fine if you want to take off, but I am going to stick around for office hours. Okay, go ahead, Braden. Ask your question about grading.
Okay, so if we like had the wrong primary key, for example, for 1 or 2 of the relations, that means our PHP scripts would be wrong because they're like checking an incorrect primary key according to like what your database would be, right? So is that going to be like full points off because we have like the wrong primary key, or would it like be some partial credit
I think I
for
can
it
give
being
you some
correct other than that
partial credit for that.
fact?
Matt's kind of overwhelmed right now, so if you have that one, send it to me, okay? And I'll take a look.
Okay, yeah, because
Tell me which ones you lost. Be specific about which queries you lost points on, and I'll take a look at it, okay?
Okay, thank you. That's all I want to know. Appreciate it.
Welcome. Other questions? Okay, don't see any other questions. Like I said, you're free to go, but like Emily, I know you had a question about, I think, the homework. Maybe go ahead.
Yes. Am I correct in assuming that it's all JavaScript, CSS, and HTML, like no PHP?
You are correct. So homework 7 is completely about JavaScript. There's no PHP. You can do this all on your local machine. In fact, there's no reason for you to try to do this assignment on the Hydra machines. This one can be done on a local machine. And yeah, put everything in one
All right,
file.
thank you.
I know that.
That was the only question I think I have for now, so thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. And a couple of students have asked if it's okay to use jQuery on homework 7. Absolutely. In fact, I recommend it. It will make your life so much easier on homework 7. Actually, I do want to, though, show you one thing. For those of you still here, quickly on homework 7, let me just show you one thing, because I've seen a couple people now not doing it for homework 7. Hang on for a second. Okay, so when you start a new game and you select it and you select a couple, and now you accept the offer, you take deal, definitely reveal the suitcase. Okay, some of you have seen haven't been revealing the suitcase. The people want to know what they won. Now, it's a nice thing to reveal all the suitcases. I realized when I went back and looked, I didn't require that you actually show all the other suitcases, but it would be nice if you actually showed everyone all the remaining suitcases, not just the suitcase they selected. But at the very least, you do need to show the suitcase they selected, and they should see it at the same time that they're seeing this alert box, not after they hit OK, but before they hit OK. So that was the one thing I wanted to point out. Okay, other questions for me? Either about the homework. If you're having trouble with something on the homework, I can help you. Emily, go ahead.
All right, well, so the instructions said like push start game button under the instructions that you'll click to restart it, but in the example it has start new game next to deal. Which one of those should we use?
Oh, you're saying it says start game here and here it says start new game?
Yeah, like the instructions like on paper say put start game like below to play another game, but the example shows start new game next to
It's
deal.
okay. Yeah, I realize they're slightly contradictory. Whichever you've done, do. If I'll probably change it to be start new game. So I prefer start new game. I think it's better, but that's not something I'm going to check, okay? But if you're still doing it, start new game would
Sounds
be
good.
better.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, got a couple of chat questions. Let me take the easier one first. Said if we've already submitted early, but the amount is revealed after the alert, that's okay. Don't bother going back and fixing it because I didn't specify that. So it's fine to do it after the alert. It's just not really good from a user interface standpoint because someone would like to see immediately what their suitcase contained. But as long as after they click OK, the reveal is done, you're good. So don't go ahead and don't fix it. Okay. The other question was about what we need to do on deletion or update for the web project. Let's see. You're saying I didn't see anything wrong about what we need to do on deletion or update. Is this for web project 2, I assume? Okay, let me take a look at that. So let's go to web project 2. So, okay, so here we are. And so it's saying update the results given with the given section ID, outcome ID major. Okay, so what do you mean when you say that we need to do, you need to do this update or delete? You mean, do you have a checking clause afterwards? You don't need a checking clause afterwards, but 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 are saying you have to update or delete. So I guess I'm not sure what. Okay, so you mean the checking clauses, right? Just a sec. You're talking about foreign constraints. And you're talking about Web Project 1, actually, not Web Project 2. Yeah, you're referring to Web Project 1. So with foreign constraints, you need to say what is going to happen. I believe what I decided that delete was fine, but you kind of have to document what is supposed to happen when you put a foreign constraint on something. In this case, it was important that the changes cascade. So I had Matt take off a few points for not specifying what happened on update. I believe I told him it was okay not to do anything with, if you did not specify delete, it was okay to take the default. But it was not okay with the default for update. I wanted you to explicitly say that on update you do a cascade, because that's really important, that if the primary key gets updated in, say, the instructor ID, it's really important that it get updated in section, which depends on the instructor, and it gets updated anywhere else that it's used. So yes, there was a few points taken off for not saying on update cascade. And I didn't think I needed to say that, because I felt like that was part of what you do with the DDL, that's just, when you specify a foreign constraint, that should be something you just always do. So it's not something I know I specified in the project, because I just felt it's something you should always be doing. It shouldn't be a lot of points though. Okay, if he, feel free to take it offline, and if there's a lot of points deducted, I'll reconsider it, okay? Okay, other questions? I realize some of you may not have a mic, so you can, if you need to chat, that's fine. You can take a few minutes to type in your question. Okay, so I'm just going to hang around here. If you're, a few of you are still here, if you're working on the project right now and you end up having a question in the next half hour, just let me know.